like there was a slight adjustment period, wasn't there, when AFC Wimbledon first returned to their spiritual home of Plough Lane, and the club was kind of figuring out how to account for some of the extra costs that were coming their way whilst remaining competitive on the pitch. I think 6 years in League One was a very good achievement as a fan-owned club in the financial climate of that level. But I think initially when the move happened, they tried to go down towards a younger model and cut the wage bill and slash the wage bill and cut down the average age of the squad under Mark Robinson, but it didn't quite work out, and it took them a bit of time to find their feet in League Two. A disappointing first season under Johnny Jackson in 22-23, but there was improvement the following campaign, largely thanks to the appointment of Craig Cope as head of football operations. And Cope seems to have made a huge difference to the quality of recruitment at Plough Lane, and he inspired a top 10 finish in his first season as head of football operations with a team led by Johnny Jackson, who certainly got it right in his second and third season, with the latter culminating in promotion last season with victory over Walsall in the playoff final. Again, much like Wimbledon's first promotion to League One in the current incarnation, as it were. It's been built on real defensive resilience and a real togetherness and a spirit that's really encapsulates the ethos of the football club. And I think those are foundations that they're going to need as they move up to League One, where they're arguably just as big underdogs as they were the first time round in their current guise, if you like, because whereas they're probably more established in some respects and more established as an operational entity with people like Cope upstairs, the financial climate of League One has also got tougher, and they've lost some key players as well. So big challenges ahead, but also plenty of reasons to believe in Johnny Jackson, in Craig Cope and the team. Plenty to get stuck into then in this summer deep dive. Yes, welcome along to EFL Debate. If you like what we do here, you can do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. That would really help us out. Delighted to be joined by Tim Hanson from the Plough Lane By Numbers account. Tim, thank you so much for joining us. What's the mood in the fan base at the moment? I imagine it's a mixture of pride in what's been achieved and belief in the group that got you to League One, with a little bit of trepidation about some of the challenges that are ahead.
Yeah, hi Gab. I think that's a good summary. I think it was a brilliant promotion. Just kind of the manner of it, where maybe we never looked outstanding in some ways over the season, but managed to have a really great knack of kind of grinding out games and built on that defensive resilience. So I think there was a lot of pride, particularly at Wembley, when there were about 30,000 Wimbledon fans there, which was incredible numbers, and that the manner of promotion with kind of 4 straight 1-0 wins. So loads of pride there to get back to League One after 3 years in League Two. But as you say, I think trepidation is the right word. It's a challenging league. I think if you look at the early odds, we're probably the outsiders in the whole division. On paper, maybe don't have the resources of even kind of the other promoted teams to strengthen. No new signings as yet as well, which some people are a bit concerned about, but hopefully that will come soon. But yeah, it's a tricky climate. I think it is a different League One than when we were last in there. So off the pitch, we're in better shape in a lot of ways with Craig Cope in place and Plough Lane now being established and being there a few years and more revenue coming into the club. But equally, we've got kind of the debt to pay off on the stadium still. There's a lot more investment in other League One clubs, a lot more kind of American investment and so on, and teams pumping more money in. So being competitive there and surviving is going to be a challenge, but I think it's one we probably relish. I think Wimbledon always do their best when they're the underdogs. So yeah, I think we're all looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Just talk to me about the work that Craig Coper's done to just recruit such a good squad on a modest budget, not one of the lowest in League Two, but not one of the highest either. You impressed with what you've seen from him over the last couple of years?
Yeah, yeah, hugely. I think he's made a massive difference behind the scenes, and particularly regarding the recruitment. I think it's interesting. It feels like maybe he's maybe a bit sort of low risk in some of the work he does. I think he's very good at targeting it in a quite straightforward way where the weaknesses are, and looking at how to resolve that. So, we did have a young squad in the certainly in the relegation season from League One and the first season in League Two, and a mix of kind of young players and a few very old players in the first season in League Two, and not a lot in the middle. We picked up a lot of injuries, often kind of muscle injuries and fatigue injuries and so on. And we had players who were kind of used to losing most weeks. So you could see what he did. He went out and got a lot more sort of peak age players, players that had shown they could play 46 game seasons and were resilient, and players who had been involved with promoted teams. Like we signed a few players from Stockport, for example. So players being around that environment has really helped. But if you look down the list of signings he's made, there's far more hits than misses, which I don't think is necessarily typical for recruitment in the lower divisions. So yeah, I think he's done a great job, and I think that gives us a lot of confidence. I suspect it's a challenge he's relishing this summer,
Mm.
because it's probably a harder job. Now we're a smaller fish in a bigger pond, and we're competing with teams that can offer more. But it requires a lot more imagination and creativity with the recruitment side. I guess for someone who specialises in that area, it's quite an exciting challenge.
Certainly is. In terms of that budgetary divide, Tim, I'm wondering that I spoke to some Wimbledon fans on the train back home from Grimsby, and there's an intriguing debate where I was actually surprised that one or two that I spoke to are in favour of pivoting perhaps away from the fan-owned model. My personal sort of understanding of it would be that you'd be reluctant to do that because you'd want to be owned by people who love and care about Wimbledon, and there's a risk with handing it to somebody else. But on the other hand, if there was a billionaire who supports Wimbledon, we'd probably know by now. And so in terms of taking the club to that next level, is there an argument for pivoting? So I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, it's kind of a hot topic of debate all the time, and actually probably more when we're struggling either on the field, or it feels like we're struggling with recruitment and not being able to sign the players we want to. And I think some Wimbledon fans will look at what other clubs are doing. There's sort of high profile cases like kind of Wrexham in recent years and so on, where if you pump a lot of money in, you can kind of recruit a lot a lot bigger players and get rewards from that. So I think and I think there would be interest in investors in investing in Wimbledon. I think our location, our story, the kind of potential of the club, if you look at all the fans at Wembley, I think if we were for sale, I suspect there'd be a queue of people who'd be interested in investing. So you can see that argument. That the flip side is, I guess, it's a kind of unique history of Wimbledon and how we came about was through the fans, and I still think there's probably a large majority of fans, myself included, who would want to stay fan owned. But it comes with challenges, because if you've got a rich owner, he can pump in as much money as he wants, and if he loses 10 million a year, he's happy to cover that. Great. We can't afford to do that, so we have to kind of strive to break even, and often that means selling your best players to kind of sustain that, which can be disappointing. I think it's tough for fans as well when, I don't know. I think if we see our natural levels in League One and we can be sustainable at League One and sort of push on a bit, I think people are be a bit happier. That what almost feels like it's happening now is, I think we overachieved in a lot of ways last season, but reportedly we had a kind of lower mid-table budget in League Two. And if you look at some of the other clubs you're against, it feels like, we're a bigger club, we should be doing more. But because of the fan ownership model compared with the way other clubs are run, it's challenging to do that. So yeah, I think it will continue to be a big debate. I don't think there'll be any change in the short term. There is talk of so I think at the moment the fans own like 70% or so of the club, and there's talk of a vote to reduce that down to just over 50%. This 50+1 model, similar to what's done in Germany. So that in theory would, and there was actually a vote for that last season that didn't pass, but it was quite close to passing. So that will probably come back on the table, and that will allow people to invest bigger sums to be part of the club, but they still wouldn't be owning it outright. So it's kind of it's less attractive to investors. But there might be certain people who that appeals to, while allowing the fans to still have majority ownership of the club. So yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, what I hope is that English football changes a bit maybe and becomes a bit more sustainable. And League One, League Two clubs losing millions of pounds every year doesn't seem a great way forward, but it feels a bit unlikely that's going to happen anytime soon. So it'll continue to be challenging.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I think from my point of view, I think what you'd want is a kind of hybrid option where you and I think you described it there. You have people who, rather than, because I can't see you ever selling 100% of the club to somebody who makes the first offer, and whatever amount of money it is, it's just not going to happen, and rightly so. But I think if you can give somebody maybe a small stake in the club and give themselves the opportunity to embrace the club and spend some time around the club and get to know people and really ensconce themselves in the ethos of the club, then you might be willing to give them a bit more trust and maybe take on a bigger stake. So it's that gradual thing rather than
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's an example of that, the first part of that anyway. So Nick Robertson owns part of the club. He's the guy who founded ASOS clothing brand and kind of lives locally and has got very into the Wimbledon story. And he's quite sort of hands-on and owns a sort of small minority chunk of the club. So yeah, there's scope for people like that maybe to own a bit more. The difficulty is partly because of the history of Wimbledon and what led to the Milton Keynes move and what we had to do, etc. That there's always a fear as well that it's not necessary. So it may be that if you sell the majority of the club, the person who buys it is perfect. They're a perfect owner. But you never know who they sell it to, who the next person sells it to, and there's all these examples. So it depends where you look. You kind of look at examples of privately owned clubs who've got investment and have done brilliantly, but there's also clubs who've got bad owners and it's all gone terribly wrong. So it depends kind of which examples you take. But I don't think there'll be any kind of big changes anytime soon.
Talk me through the current board of directors then, Tim, and how do you feel they kind of represent the club? Because that's obviously slightly different to the ownership situation. I think Mick Buckley's on the BOD, isn't he?
Yeah, so he's the chair of the club, and then there's a kind of PLC board, which is kind of the day-to-day running of the club, and then there's the Don's Trust board, who are elected by the fans, and they're kind of like the oversight board. So yeah, which I would think is kind of a thankless task because it's it's a voluntary role that people actually invest quite a lot of time in, and when things don't going well, they're kind of the first people that get blamed. But I think behind the scenes, particularly the sort of professional side of the club, things have got a lot more professional and better run in the last couple of years. So yeah, obviously kind of Craig Cope coming on board as well, and we got a kind of MD on the commercial side of the club, who's come in and kind of done a really good job as well. So I think it's becoming a bit better on. I think there were things with Plough Lane and kind of contracts they got into that probably in hindsight weren't great, with sort of things like ticketing and catering and so on. But I think they're trying to improve things as much as possible. And I think it was Mick Butler's decision in consultation with other people to stick with Johnny Jackson, which I think was a pretty unpopular decision after that first season. And a lot of people thought, he's got no idea what he's doing. But that's turned out to be quite a good decision. So
Sure.
yeah, I think they deserve some credit for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of Johnny Jackson, then Tim, he's certainly defied doubt, has certainly proven me wrong. So I have to applaud him for what's been achieved over the last couple of seasons. Just talk to me about the influence that he's had and how his leadership has got Wimbledon promoted.
I think, yeah, he's done a great job. I think he'd be the first to admit he's not done it on his own. So Craig Coates had a big impact coming in, and now being director of football. And I think he's got a good team with Terry Skiverton and Dave Reddington and the coaching staff as well, and Ashley Bayes obviously on with the goalkeepers, which has
Oh
been a
yeah, I
big
love
part of
Bezo.
it. Um, yeah, so but I think he's him and the team have done brilliant in terms of the organisation and the sort of defensive side of the game. Our defensive numbers were sort of incredible over the season. So I think we, including the playoffs, conceded 35 in 49 games and 24 clean sheets across those games. Of our 23 wins, 19 of them were without conceding. So all these kind of stats, which were really impressive. And actually, we had quite a lot of different centre back partnerships, and it wasn't all about Joe Lewis, Ryan Johnson, Riley Harbottle, and Owen Goodman. There were a lot of other players coming in and doing a really good job. So I think Jackson and his team have kind of built it on that defensive solidity. Actually, over the last two seasons, I think we had the third best defensive record, even in the previous season. Fewer conceded in one of the promoted clubs. I can't quite remember which one now. And then obviously that's got even stronger. So I think that's one thing that's been really great. I think as well, he's just it seems like the players all love him. I think we saw that in the celebrations at Wembley, right? They all seem very united,
Yeah.
and it seems like a very popular manager under the players. And I think even when we were struggling, it felt like the players sort of had his backing, or backed him. So that's a big thing. And I think the other thing that's come to the fore is I would say he's never been kind of too high, never too low this season. Um, he's kind of kept things on a level over the season, even when fans were panicking at the end when we were going to that Grimsby game and it looked like we might miss out on the players altogether. He was a very kind of calm influence on the team. He talked about actually reducing some of the tactical detail in training and just kind of getting more of a sense of fun into it and enjoyment and taking the pressure off and that kind of thing. So I think those kind of softer skills as well are a big strength of his too.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, excited to see Johnny Jackson get his opportunity at this level. He obviously had a brief stint at Charlton, but didn't get much time there, and probably wasn't in the best time for the club from an ownership point of view, because this was before their current owners. So excited for him to have that opportunity in League One. Let's have a look at that squad then, Tim. The big thing that stands out to me is in the goalkeeping department. Bit of attention needed. Don't think you've even got a senior contracted goalkeeper at the moment. Owen Goodman's gone back to Crystal Palace. I would imagine he'll get a top end League One loan. I'd be surprised if you're able to retain him. So yeah, pretty straightforward that one. You need a couple of goalkeepers.
Yeah, we do. It's actually probably one of the things I'm least worried about, though. I think if we reversed 12 months to this day, like this time last year, we didn't have a goalkeeper then either. So both Owen Goodman and Lewis Ward, who was the backup, came in like sometime in July, I think, last year. So I think because of how well we've done with loan keepers, and because there's actually a lot of them out there, like promising young keepers at Premier League and kind of Championship academies, there's no shortage of promising young keepers available. And I think we've got a great reputation, particularly Bezo, of developing goalkeepers. And we see that they improve under us. I had big concerns about Goodman early last season. I thought he was a bit of a weak link for us. And then he turned out to be, brilliant over the second half of the season. So I kind of trust, Ashley Bayes and the team that won't be a big issue. It'll be interesting, where we go. It would be nice to kind of have our own keeper that we develop over a few years. It looked like Nick Zanev might have done that, but his form really kind of dropped off in his latter time here. But I suspect we'll go down that loan route again. I don't know kind of who it will be, but it's something I'm pretty trusting of what based on what's happened in the past, if you look at some of the loan keepers we had Alex Bass the year before as well. Obviously, we've had Aaron Ramsdale in the past.
Yeah.
George Long we had several years ago, and he was actually brilliant for us. Maybe not pushed on as we thought he might. Keller Roos going further back. So we've kind of had all these keepers that have been great, and there's not actually that many misses in the keeping department. So not too concerned about that. Although when you sketch out your team and you don't have a goalkeeper, maybe it looks a bit odd, but it will sort itself out, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to presume that Johnny Jackson's going to stick with the 3-5-2 or variations of for this season. In which case, the right centre back options we're looking at Riley Harbottle and Isaac Ogundere. Harbottle, I think I'm right in saying Harbottle's left-footed, isn't he?
No, he's right.
Oh, he is right-footed. Okay,
I think
right.
he's decent enough on his left, but no, he's mostly right-footed. Yeah.
Okay, right. So yeah, it'd be those two competing with one another.
Yeah.
What?
So that's a good battle. I think. Harbottle came in at the end of the season, did really well, but Ogundere was fantastic as well. So two great options there.
Yeah, for sure. I think Ogundere, I've always liked just for it because he's quick and strong and good in 1v1s. But it felt for large portions of last season that Harbottle had the nod in that position.
Yeah.
So middle centre half, then you've got Joe Lewis. I imagine he's going to be the first choice when he's fit, just because he's a real battler, isn't he, at the heart of that defence?
Yeah, he's a battler, but I think he's more than that as well. I kind of watched the playoff final footage back afterwards, and Troy Deeney was talking after the game and saying he didn't think Joe Lewis could step up to League One and he lacked pace, etc. Which I think is complete rubbish, to be honest. He's probably one of our quickest players. He's very quick. Decent enough on the ball. Obviously, he is strong and a real battler as well, as you say. But there's a lot more to his game than that. I think he kind of maybe gets sort of labelled as a bit of an old-fashioned centre half because he looks a bit agricultural. But I think he can play a lot as well. Pace is really valuable, and I think he'll be fine if he stays fit. I think he'll be, easily be able to step up to League One. But yeah, he does pick up the odd injury. We always kind of miss him when he's out. But yeah, certainly if he's fit, I've got no concerns about him at all.
Yeah, I think also he's. I think it must be the sort of 80s hairstyle that makes people think he's old school.
Yeah.
In terms of left centre half, you've got Ryan Johnson staying on. Is he one that you would have? I think for a left centre or outside centre half in a back three, pace does become a more important attribute because you get drawn into those 1v1s. Is he one that you would think he's going to need the right sort of protection?
Yeah, possibly. He didn't have a great sort of first half of the season last time. Struggled a bit, made a few errors, and I think he had a bit of an injury at the time that he was carrying. But he really pushed on over the season. The playoff final, I thought he's one of our best players. But he is, I would say, more of an old-fashioned centre half, kind of head it, kick it type player, and not really played too much or at all at this level before. So yeah, I think he'll do a good job. He's our vice captain. He's kind of a big presence in the squad and really sort of influential figure. And I think he's a player that's been doubted before and kind of shown he can kind of step up and be a really key member of the team. But yeah, he does lack a bit of pace. Towards the end of the season, Tilly was almost playing as a sort of left back, to be honest. At times, he was getting very deep in that wing back role, and was giving him quite a lot of cover. So I think the dynamic, between him and the left wing back will be interesting. The way the wide centre backs play is a bit different as well. Particularly if Ogundere plays on the right, he tends to push forward a fair bit, and Johnson less so. He's not kind of running up and down the wing like you see some wide centre backs do nowadays. I wonder if we may try and add another left footer at the back to give a bit more competition. If we're playing back three, you kind of need more than 4 centre backs, so it might be an area we look to strengthen a little bit.
Do you think there's opportunity for one or two talented defenders coming through the ranks? Ethan Sutcliffe was on the retain list, a lad called Young as well.
Possibly. From what I've seen, Sutcliffe has been around for a while and had a couple of loans, but I wouldn't say he's made a massive impression in those loans. Leo Young's just had 1 year. like since turning pro, and had a couple of loans and did okay. I think he'll probably be out on loan again. There's another centre back we've signed just turned probably 18 now and signed on his first year. I'm going to try and remember his name as I'm talking, but I think he's got a bit more bit more potential. But again, I mean, I think it's very hard for like an 18-year-old centre back to come into like a League One or League Two team because they develop a bit later. Um, and yeah, so I'm not sure any of those will particularly feature this season. It might be nice to have one in the squad to make up the numbers a bit, but the problem is if they're kind of fifth or sixth choice, they're not playing any football. So I think that we will try and get them out on loan, and maybe in the latter half of the season might feature a bit more. But yeah, probably not featured too much of the first team, I wouldn't have thought.
Absolutely. Now, the big challenge, I think, is going to be replacing Josh Nerfville, the pace and strength that he offered at right wing back, and also the productivity as well. So that's going to be a key focus, hasn't it, for Craig Cope and co.
Yeah, I think it's the biggest loss. I'm sure we'll talk about Tilly as well, but I think Nerfville. I mean, he was our player of the year. I voted for him as player of the year. I think he won that quite comfortably. His return of goals and assists maybe wasn't amazing, but we weren't a very high scoring team, and he was just a really good outlet for us. There were so many times we looked to kind of play him in. Over the season, I think teams tended to double up on him, which created opportunities and space elsewhere. Scored some crucial goals, obviously in the playoffs against Notts County in the second leg, and really improved over the season. So yeah, disappointing to lose him, and it is an area both wing backs are kind of key areas where we need to bring in some bodies over the summer, and that will determine a lot of how we do. I think it was interesting. I kind of did a preview thing this time last year for the League Two season. I said at the time that I thought wing backs were our weak spots. And then actually Nerfville was our player of the season until he had a great year as well, who had never really played wing back before then. So yeah, you never quite know what's going to happen, and can make plenty of bad predictions. But yeah, as it stands, we don't really have any natural players for those roles.
Well, the only one I've got down is a lad called Foyo, but it might be because he was a winger, and I thought maybe in a 3-5-2 it might be that kind of option. But yeah, we'll see. So wing backs definitely required 2 or 3 of those, that's for sure. In terms of midfield, I want to ask you about Jake Reeves and his importance to the team in terms of that conductor role.
Yeah, I mean he's crucial. Yeah, I mean he's played lots of games since he came back for his second spell, and he's a proper kind of manager on the pitch type. So I think Jackson's got total trust in him, and he's constantly communicating with the other players about kind of what we should be doing during the game, and who should be where, etc. And if you look at how good we are defensively, a lot of that is every player knowing their role on the pitch and all the gaps and distances being what you want them to be. And a lot of that is drilled in training, but also needs some work on the pitch and being adaptive and so on. He's crucial in that role. I think that there was talk towards the end of the season that he was struggling, and I think that was a fair comment. He missed a spell injured sort of in the autumn and early winter, and then came back in and played every single game for like 3.5 months and every single minute. And people were saying maybe he should drop out of the team around that time. And that was when he got sent off away at Doncaster with straight red, which is kind of unlike him. But actually it worked quite well, giving him a break before. So he came back for the Grimsby game on final day, and played the 3 playoff games. And you could see his importance over those games. So I think probably one of those players you notice more when he's not there. Obviously we saw him when he was younger, and he was a lot more kind of dynamic and running forward a lot more. Now he is more sort of sits deep, conducts things. But yeah, I still think he's going to have a big role to play.
Yeah, I think maybe that understudy to Jake Reeves, who could do a similar job to him, but is a bit younger, wouldn't expect to start more than 5 to 10 league games, but can just come in and do a similar job. I think that would be a really smart profile for the club to recruit to.
It would, yeah. I mean, we do have a couple of good young players in the midfield area. So I think they got high hopes for Harry Sidwell, who's Steve Sidwell's son. who, yes, so he had his first sort of professional year last year, and he actually came on away at Harrogate. I think when we had lots of injuries in the midfield, just having turned 18 not long before that, and he's very much, from the bits I've seen of him, as a kind of deep sitter, control the game, keep it simple type kind of player. I don't know if they'll look to kind of introduce him to the squad this season, or maybe send him out on loan, but be interested to watch him. And Kai Jennings is another in the midfield who we got high hopes for, but he's a more attacking player. I should just say the centre back I mentioned was Riley Horan. Should mention his name, but from the bits I've seen of him, he's probably, although he's younger, I think sort of long term might have more chance of breaking in than the other two young centre backs you mentioned.
Okay, interesting. So Horan definitely one to watch, and possibly Sidwell as that kind of understudy, if you like, to Jake Reeves. In terms of those more dynamic eights in that Johnny Jackson midfield, Miles Hippolyte, Tim, talk to me about the kind of left-footed ball carrying qualities that he can bring to the Dons.
Yeah, I mean, I thought he had a bit of a strange season, because early months of the season I thought he was really good. And actually, our midfield in those early months we mixed up a bit in the first few weeks of the season, and then it turned into Reeves, Smith, Hippolyte. And then if you look at the end of the season in the playoffs, that was our midfield as well. But sort of in between times, we had some injuries in the midfield. Obviously, Reeves was out, but Hippolyte missed a huge chunk of the season. He got an injury in a game at Tranmere, I think, around kind of late November, early December, and didn't start a game again until the first leg of the playoff semi-finals. But when he did play, early season and in the playoffs, I thought he was brilliant for us. And actually, we're a very kind of functional team, not always as the easiest on the eye, maybe, and can be a bit predictable in attacking play. But having someone who can travel with the ball and is really comfortable on it in the centre of the pitch, I think gives you a bit of an extra dimension. So yeah, he was great in the playoffs, and obviously scored the winner at Wembley. So excited to see what he can do if he can stay fit all season. I think he could do okay in League One.
Let's hope that's the case. I wanted to ask you about Callum Maycock as well. Do you think I felt like he's got a good relationship sometimes with Josh Kelly, because they've been together at a previous club, I think Solihull Moors, and they seem to have that kind of telepathy. What did you make of Callum Maycock's first season at the club?
I'd say it's a bit mixed. He had some great moments. I mean, he scored 2 at the home win over MK early season, coming off the bench, and actually him and Kelly exchanged passes for his second goal there, which was an example of what you were saying, and they definitely have that link up. And then actually, he came into the team later on in the season. He did brilliantly in a win away at Carlisle, scored a fantastic goal. But overall was a bit inconsistent, and kind of fell out of the team towards the end, and they brought Hippolyte back in, and you could see there was a bit of a step up when Hippolyte came back in. I think he sort of struggles to really, put a stamp on games. He is like a very kind of quiet type, I think, and I think he's got a lot of ability, but hasn't maybe shown it all so far. And I think, I don't know. I think that the sort of best version of a Johnny Jackson team is quite sort of aggressive, players who kind of do a lot of talking and these types of things. So yeah, I don't know. Certainly towards the end of the season, I don't know if Jackson kind of had the faith to put him, apart from kind of some cameos off the bench. I'd be interested to see how much he features. I don't think he'd be a starter for us in League One, but yeah, he's certainly got some ability if he can get more consistency in his game.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think if you wanted to build your midfield, you have your starting midfield. Somebody who didn't start in a league game after November, and somebody who was inconsistent in League Two, you would maybe question whether that starting them both in League One, whether you'd quite have enough reliability there. Obviously, Ali Smith, in an ideal world, you'd retain him. I don't know how likely that's looking, but if not, I would suggest maybe you'd need at least one more midfielder.
Yeah, I think so. I'm still sort of hopeful on Smith. I haven't really heard anything, but I don't know. He was great for us, and actually, I mean, Johnny Jackson loved him. He played every single week, apart from he missed one game through suspension, and then he played nearly every minute for the rest of the season.
Mhm.
And he covered really well for Reeves when he was injured in the deeper role, but then also in a more attacking role as a kind of number 8, he was really good as well, and great kind of in the playoffs as well at the end of the season. So I don't know, I'm hopeful. I think we would make him a very nice offer as much as we can do within our budget. And I don't know if teams at the top of League One would really be kind of going for him. So it might be a team at sort of lower end of League One might be his natural level for now, and feels like it'll be nice fit for us if he chose us. It might be good for him. He seems to enjoy it a lot. So it'll be great if we could get him. I think you're right. I mean, if we started the season with kind of Reeves, Hippolyte, Maycock as the midfield 3, I'd probably have some concerns over that, and an area we need to strengthen. But it will look a lot rosier if we did get Smith. But even then, we might look to add one more, I think, in that area.
Yeah, perhaps more additions required in midfield. Up top is interesting because you certainly don't have the question mark in terms of depth, in the same way that you do in other areas of the squad. But I think there is each of the 4 options you have in attack for those 2 centre forward areas have question marks, in the sense that Omar Bujil, I thought he was a really important player for much of last season, but there was an argument towards the end that you actually played better without him. Stevens, again, he hasn't done it in League One before. Sassy's a really exciting talent, but only started once last season, and that was actually at left wing back. And then Josh Kelly, who was inconsistent, you could argue, in League Two, let alone League One. So again, it's 4 competent options, but also you're thinking, is there somebody you could bring in that could sort of move the needle a bit more?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our attacking numbers weren't great last season, right? So we scored, I think, 56 goals in the regular season. And I sort of look back, the last time a team had got promoted from League Two, having scored that few goals, was Southend in 2014 to 15. I think they scored 54. So it's unusual to get promoted, having scored those few goals, and it really dropped off even more over the second half of the season. So I think we scored 21 in 23 games in the second half of the regular season. Steve has got 1 in his last 19 games. So there's all these kind of concerning attacking stats even in League Two. And I think you're right, it's not probably the right blend, or maybe a good enough blend for League One. So it's definitely been an area we look to strengthen. The big thing for me, I think, is, so I think Stephen the Bugle. If we were kicking off tomorrow, Stephen Bugle will probably be the starting front 2. And I think they've got a lot of good attributes, but there's no pace there at all. It was interesting. Johnny Jackson kind of talked last season about, we kind of have Pigott and Bugle as bigger types, if you like, although very different kind of players, and he kind of lumped Stevens and Kelly together as more players who kind of remain behind, and that kind of thing. But actually, that's not really Stevens' game. He's a penalty box poacher, and he's actually okay at the hold up play. He's not the biggest, but he's very strong. But he's never going to get away from defenders. And obviously, Bugle's not the quickest either. And then you got Kelly and Sassy have got more pace, but they don't really have the nous and the kind of finishing ability, and at least yet, in terms of scoring goals. And one interesting aspect actually last season was, so obviously we were ahead a lot in games. We saw out a lot of games kind of 1-0, defended really well. And you kind of think a team like that would be look to be a threat on the counter attack. So you sort of 1-0 up late in games, and you're soaking up pressure and you hit teams on the break. But I think we scored 4 counter attack goals all season, which was one of the lowest in the division, which I think is because we don't really have that pace, at least amongst the kind of first choice players. So yeah, I don't think the blend is quite right. I think we'll look to add more pace in that area. Steve and the Bugle are both unknowns. I actually think Bugle might take to League One a bit better than Stevens will. I think Stevens needs you to create chances for him in the box to see the best of him. And he's a very good finisher and very good at kind of, his movement's good and good at sniffing out the chances. But, realistically, we're probably going to be one of the lowest scorers in the league. So we're not going to get loads of chances like that. So, yeah, it'll be interesting what we do in the attacking areas. But I definitely agree with you. I don't think that the blend is quite right at the moment.
Yeah, could do with striking gold with a loan or something like that.
Yeah,
That would certainly help your chances. Or if you could find another Al Hamadi,
yeah, that'd be nice.
certainly would, wouldn't it? Okay, so in terms of additions, looking at the macro picture, I think you need, from what we've discussed, probably another two goalkeepers, at least one more defender, another couple of midfielders, which takes it up to five, I think, and then another three or four wing backs, take up to eight, and then maybe another forward. So I think you're going to need another 9 or 10 additions between now and the end of the window. Is that something you'd agree with?
Yeah, about right. Maybe even slightly more. I mean, ideally, you want kind of two players for every position, right? So, yeah, I think potentially even another defender in there, and we might look to get versatile players in there who can cover more than
Mm.
one position. But yeah, 10 or so, I think is a good ballpark.
Yeah, that makes sense. So in terms of expectation, you kind of hinted at it earlier, Tim, that your expectations are quite modest in terms of if we can finish 20th or above, you're going to be a happy Don.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think survival would be a decent achievement. It's difficult because you kind of you get promoted on a high and you kind of really want to push on, but then you look at the reality of what you're up against, and it will be tough. Um, the positive, I think, is I saw a stat the other day that I think going back about 12 years, only 19% of promoted clubs from League Two have got relegated at the first attempt. So kind of 1 in 5 or so. But it's a higher ratio amongst the playoff teams, and actually the last few years, the winning playoff team in League Two has tended to struggle a bit more, as you'd expect. With they're generally maybe not quite as good, and that they've got the shorter summer. But most teams kind of go up and do okay, and there's lots of examples in recent years of teams that have gone up and done okay. So obviously, Stevenage have adjusted to it really well, and Leyton Orient particularly, Northampton have done okay, and other teams like that. Um, so I think there's good sort of models there. Um, yeah, I think survival would be good. I'm I'm kind of reasonably optimistic because I think a good defence can take you a really long way, and I still think we'll have a really good defence. I think if we start the season with Johnson, Lewis, um, and Harbottle probably, I think that's good.
Mm.
Um, you know, maybe there's question marks over some of them, some of the aspects of their game individually, but we're so kind of organised. And I think we'll retain that with a lot of the players staying down the spine of the team and obviously the coaching staff being in place. So I think that could take you a long way. So I think that gives me some optimism. The things I worry about a bit more, I think, where are the goals going to come from? And also I sort of look at the other teams in the division. And if you think you're going to stay up, you got to pick four. They're going to go down. I'm sure you find this every year when you do your predictions. It's not always
Yeah.
easy, and people don't always realise that when they see what you put there. But yeah, it is tough to maybe be very clear and say right, these four teams are definitely worse than us. But yeah, I think we'll make a decent fist of it. I think, and it's very hard to judge now, right? Because as we said, we need to add about 10 players, and who those 10 players are will determine a lot of terms, how it's looking into the season. But I'm certainly at the stage now where I'm still, got plenty of optimism, even though it will be a difficult challenge.
Mm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, like you mentioned, I do my 1 to 24s, and one of my processes for that this year, Tim, is to rate each team out of 10 on 14 different categories that I think are going to determine their fate. So, what I'll do is I'll name the category, and you give me a number between 1 and 10.
Okay.
Starting with ownership.
Wow. I mean, it's a tricky one for us. I mean, I'll say 7. Do you want me
7,
to
perfect.
expand on these or just give you numbers?
You can expand a little bit, yeah, but it's a bit of a quick
Yeah.
fire format.
Okay,
Um,
yeah. I mean, ownership is tough because we're fan owned. I love that we're fan owned. It gives you this big sense of pride about what we're doing, and it means that nothing too mad is probably going to happen. But yeah, it kind of, I guess there's a limitation there as well in terms of what we can spend, etc. as well. So that's why I settled on that number.
Makes a lot of sense. Infrastructure.
I'll say 7 there as well.
7 for infrastructure. Playing budget.
I mean, probably like 3.
3, yeah, relative to the
Relative to the
division,
level.
of course. Management.
I think 7 on that one as well.
7 on
So I
management.
kind of my day job is is working on surveys and designing surveys, and there's always a thing where a lot of people on these 10-point scales always pick 7 out of 10 for everything, which
Oh, I
I'm
know,
very
yeah.
much doing so far. But yeah.
7 out of 10's become the, and do you know how, like, when people do the player ratings, and like 6 out of 10 is almost like a bad performance because
Yeah, exactly,
people always are very reluctant to go below a 6, aren't they?
Yeah.
Okay, so next one is the the goalkeeping department is a bit of a not applicable for now. So I'll move on to the defence.
Defence, I'm going to get 8. I think that's very strong.
Yeah, I agree. Midfield.
Let's say 5. How it's looking at the moment, but yeah, it may change.
5 pending a 6, depending on additions. Attack.
I'll go for 4. I think just looking at our record last season and maybe some concerns, but again may change with recruitment.
Of course. Depth relative to this stage of the window.
I'll say 5. Yeah, I think more work needed there, but it's not terrible in some areas.
Okay, squad stability.
Squad stability, I'll say 7. Yeah, there's a lot of stability down the spine of the team.
Growth potential.
Growth potential. I'll say 5.
5 for growth potential. Team spirit.
Team spirit, very good. Let's get 8 for that.
8 for team spirit. Fitness.
Interesting. Yeah, we had this record last season where we hardly scored any goals late in games, which I don't know. I don't know how much of that was fitness related. I think I would say, despite that, overall is pretty good. I'll go for 6 on that.
6 for fitness, and finally quality.
Quality. Let's go 5 at the moment, but yeah, it kind of depends on what the window brings.
5 at the moment. Okay. Well, thanks for that. So just some final quick fire questions from me then, Tim, just to round things off. Biggest reason but to believe in Wimbledon right now?
I would say kind of the defence we've got and the solidity we've shown there, but also sort of the momentum of coming through from promotion and the high from that, I think will kind of take us quite a long way.
Biggest reason for doubt?
Probably quality in attacking areas.
Makes sense.
And budget, actually, as well.
Yeah, of course.
Related stuff.
And finally, too early for a prediction, but give me a rough sense of where you think next season, what direction next season might be heading in.
I mean, I'm pretty sure we'll be bottom half. I'll be amazed and very impressed if we do better than that. But as it stands, I'll say I don't think we'll go down. I would say somewhere around the 18th mark, maybe. But yeah, as you say, it's early days. So in a month or so time, I might have a better steer on that.
Of course, yeah, very early days. Listen, Tim, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your insight on AFC Wimbledon. You can follow Plough Lane By Numbers at Plough Lane By Num on Twitter. You can also get subscribed to EFL Debate on YouTube and on Spotify. That would help us out a lot. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back with another summer deep dive very soon.